First, I want to thank Leah for that very kind introduction. And I think anytime you walk into a school in this community and you meet our young people and our students and our teachers and faculty, staff, administrators, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, you see the magic happening. And every day I walk into a public school is a day I am energized and hopeful for the future, no matter what the headlines are. I also want to thank Dr. Fuller, Raven, and Matt for the invitation, and to the entire High Point Schools partnership for hosting this wonderful event this morning, and for the work that you do every single day supporting our schools and our children. I want to start by telling you why I'm here. Not why I showed up this morning. That's easy. You're feeding me breakfast. But why I ran for office in the first place. In 2018, I decided to jump into politics for one reason above all others. That's public education. I had spent years watching what was happening in Raleigh, the slow starvation of school budgets, the disrespect shown to our educators, the quiet dismantling of the system that had built the state that I love and call home. And I kept waiting for someone else to fix it. And eventually I realized I was done waiting. But I also need to tell you why this issue lives in my bones in a way that goes beyond policy. I have two children. Jack is 7, Charlotte is 5, and they're both students in Guilford County schools right now. Learning to read, learning to add, and learning how to be part of a community that is larger than themselves. And every single day I walk them to the door and I watch them disappear into that building, I'm trusting their teachers and their schools with the most precious thing that I have. That's not rhetoric, that's any day of the week. So when I talk about public education this morning, I'm not speaking to you just as a state senator with committee assignments and a voting record. I'm speaking as a father who has skin in the game, whose children's future depends on us getting this right. And I want to start with a simple proposition. Strong public schools are the greatest economic development strategy we have.
Amen.
And I know that's a bold claim to make in a room full of business and civic leaders who understand economic development, but I want you to hear me out. When a company is deciding where to locate, whether it's advanced manufacturing, tech, logistics, aviation, or healthcare, they're not just asking about tax incentives. They're not just asking about highway access. They're asking 3 questions. Can I hire people here? Can my employees' kids get a good education here? And will this community be thriving in 10 years? Or will it be hollowed out? Our public schools answer those questions. They are the foundation everything else is built upon. Guilford County added more than 15,000 jobs this year. You all deserve a round of applause for that. We attracted over $5 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars in investment. That kind of growth doesn't fall from the sky, and it doesn't happen without a skilled workforce. And where do you think that workforce comes from? It comes from the young people sitting in classrooms right now at Ferndale Middle School, at High Point Central, at Southwest Guilford. It comes from a kid in a 3rd grade who doesn't know yet that she's going to run a business someday. Mm-hmm. If you want to know where tomorrow's jobs will go, you follow today's 3rd graders. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you something about those 3rd graders, something that headlines don't always capture. Guilford County Schools just reported a 92.1% graduation rate. That's not just good. That's amazing, and it outpaces the state average. It outpaces the other large districts we always are comparing ourselves to. And we have held that line for 10 straight years through a pandemic, through budget cuts, through everything this General Assembly has thrown at public education. And we have achieved record high graduation rates for our Black students and students with disabilities this year. Records, the best that we've ever done. High Point schools specifically improved their accountability scores in 2024-25, with more schools meeting or exceeding growth than the year before. That is progress. That is excellence. And that excellence was forged by teachers who stayed late, by principals who believed, by parents who showed up, and by community members, many of you sitting in this room today, that showed up to support our kids. Which brings me to my second point. None of this can happen without local community support. The state can pass laws, the district can design programs, but only the community can give a child the one thing no legislator can legislate: the feeling that their school and their future truly matter to the adults around them. A child knows when the adults have given up, and a child knows when they haven't. And that's what the High Point Schools Partnership represents. That's what each of you represent. When local businesses open their doors for mentorships and internships, when faith communities wrap their arms around a school, when civic leaders show up at bond referendums and say yes to investing in our kids, that sends a message. It echoes through every hallway and every classroom. It says to a kid who might be doubting herself, "You matter here. We see you, and we're not going anywhere." I want to take a moment to recognize what this community did with those bond referendums. We didn't wait for permission from Raleigh. You stepped up. You said that our school buildings matter, that a child shouldn't have to learn in a crumbling classroom. You said that the learning environment matters, and you put your money where your values are. This wasn't the state legislature doing that. This wasn't the federal government. This was High Point, and that was Guilford County. That was neighbors deciding that the child next door deserves the same opportunities as any other child in this state. High Point's employers and civic leaders cannot outsource this job to Raleigh or to Washington. If public schools are our talent pipeline, and they are, then every business and every neighborhood has skin in the game. Now I want to talk about something slightly more complicated: the way we measure school success in this state. You've probably seen the letter grades. Every public school in this state gets an A through an F grade, stamped on them like a brand. Those grades get published and reported and used to make judgments about which schools are good and which are failing. And here's how the system actually works. 80% of that grade is based on achievement. What percentage of students score proficient on end of grade and end of course testing on a single day? Only 20% is based on growth, whether students are actually making progress based on where they started. And think about what that means for a moment. It means a school where kids arrive 3 grade levels behind, maybe because of poverty, maybe because of trauma, maybe because life dealt them a hard hand before they ever walked through that door. That school could move those kids 2 full years forward in a single year and still still get slapped with a D or an F because the final test score doesn't hit the proficiency threshold. It means our current system tells us more about a neighborhood's zip code than what's actually happening inside that building. Last year, 484 schools in North Carolina received a D or F while still meeting or exceeding their growth targets. Let me say that again. Nearly 500 schools were labeled performing by the state, even though their students were making the progress that we asked them to make. We asked them to grow, they grew, and we branded them failures anyway. The state's own Department of Public Instruction acknowledged that the national data shows North Carolina schools are performing considerably better than their state performance grades suggest. The reality is our labels are harsher than the truth. And now I want to be clear, I'm not asking that we hide data from parents. Transparency matters. Parents deserve to know how their neighborhood schools are doing. But we shouldn't pretend a single letter grade on a website can capture the full story of a school. And we absolutely should not use that letter to shame teachers and principals who are doing heroic work under impossible circumstances. A school where kids are making 2 years worth of growth in 1 year is not a D school. It's a school performing a daily miracle, and it deserves help, not a scarlet letter. So what do we do about it? Well, the good news is there's already momentum for change in Raleigh. A task force is working on redesigning the grading system. Educators, advocates, and yes, even some legislators are pushing for reform. And here's what I believe reform should look like. First, we need more weight on growth. If we're going to judge schools, let's judge them on whether they're actually moving students forward, not just on where those students happen to start through no fault of their own. Second, we need multiple measures. One standardized test on one single day is a snapshot, a single frame in a full-length movie. It's not the whole picture, and we should be looking at other things, like graduation rates, access to advanced coursework, career and technical credentials, school climate, post-secondary enrollment. We should be looking at the full story. Third, we need to use accountability to provide support, not just slap on labels. When we identify a school that's struggling, the response shouldn't be stigma and shame. It should be resources and reinforcement. Accountability without investment is just cruelty dressed up as standards. And my commitment to you and to all the kids of Guilford County is to keep pushing for an accountability model that holds us honest about our results and honest about the challenges our schools face. And that brings me to the role of the General Assembly and what's happening in Raleigh today. Some of you may know that the North Carolina Supreme Court decided a case called Leandro. That case established something fundamental. Every child in North Carolina has a constitutional right to a sound, basic education. And the court was crystal clear on who bears responsibility. Not individual districts, not local property taxes, the state, the General Assembly, us. A sound basic education means students leave school prepared to function in society, participate in the economy, and exercise their rights and responsibilities as citizens. And that's not my opinion. That's not a talking point. That's what the courts have said our state's constitution demands of us. So when we in the legislature make funding decisions about teacher pay, about the accountability system, about vouchers and charters, we're not just making policy choices. We're either honoring a constitutional obligation or we're betraying it. So let me give you a quick update on where things stand. The state budget was due July 1st. It's now December, for those keeping track. And that means we're 5 months late. Let that sink in. 5 months late. And so what does that mean in school buildings across North Carolina today? Superintendents can't plan, they're flying blind. Principals can't hire with confidence. They don't know what positions they can afford. Teachers don't know what their pay will be. The people we trust with our children are being told, just wait and wonder. Districts are limping along under a continuing resolution, patching holes, postponing investments, and holding their breath. 5 months of uncertainty, 5 months of chaos, 5 months of a General Assembly that has a constitutional obligation to fund public education simply refusing to do its job. This is not a minor procedural hiccup. This is a dereliction of duty and an abandonment of responsibility. And while the budget sits undone, here's what this legislature has found time for. Dramatically expanding the school voucher program. In 2023, eliminated the income cap entirely. And now we're funneling an estimated $4 billion over 10 years away from public schools into private school tuition. And here's what the data shows. In 24-25, only about 6,700 of the 80,000 plus vouchers went to students who previously were in public education. The vast majority went to families whose kids were already in private school. We're not rescuing kids from underperforming schools. We're writing tuition checks for families who never intended to step foot in a public school to begin with. So we can't pass a budget on time, but we can find $4 billion for private school vouchers. We can't give teachers the certainty they deserve about their own paychecks, but we can spend session after session on culture war bills that divide our communities instead of strengthening them. And here's what I keep coming back to. When we choose tax cuts over teacher pay, when we expand vouchers without accountability, when we leave schools twisting in the wind for 5 months, we're making a statement. We're telling the world whose children we value and whose children we don't. And I think High Point's kids deserve a better answer than that. I know they do. And let me close where I started, with why this matters to me personally. My son Jack is 7, and he's learning to read chapter books right now. My daughter, Charlotte, is 5, and she's learning to write her letters. They come home bursting to tell me about their teachers, about their friends, what they did in recess, and what book they read at story time. They don't know anything about per pupil funding, formulas, accountability metrics, Leandro obligations. They don't know that we haven't passed a budget in 5 months. They don't know about voucher programs or our political fights in Raleigh. They just know whether they feel safe, whether they feel valued, and whether the adults in their lives seem to believe in their future. And here's what gives me hope. When I look around this room, I see a room full of adults who do believe in their future. When I look at what High Point has done, the bond referendums you've passed, the partnerships you've built, the teachers you've supported, I see a community that has decided those children, my children, our children, are worth fighting for. And that's the promise of public education. Not that every school will be perfect, not that every challenge will be easy, but that every child will have a place. A community school, a shared investment in their potential. A statement by all of us together that we believe in them before they have proven anything, that we see their worth before they've earned a single credential. You know, I think about the high point and the high point that Jack and Charlotte will inherit, the North Carolina that they'll grow up in. And I refuse to believe that our best days are behind us. I refuse to accept that we can't build schools worthy of our children's dreams. Because when I look at a kindergartner learning her letters, I don't see a line item in a budget. I see a future teacher, a future nurse, a future engineer. I see someone who someday might cure a disease or start a business or coach Little League or simply raise her own children to be good and decent people. And that's what's at stake. That's what we're fighting for. Not test scores, not letter grades, but children, futures, the kind of community we want to be. The High Point Schools Partnership exists because you understand something I wish more people in Raleigh understood. When we invest in our children, we're not spending money. We're planting seeds. And those seeds will grow into a High Point and a North Carolina more prosperous, more just, and more hopeful than anything we can imagine today. So thank you. Thank you for showing up, for investing, and for believing. If we get this right, our children will look back and know that when it mattered, the adults in their lives stood up, that we didn't look away, that we fought for them. And someday they will do the same for their own children. That's how we build a future. That's how we honor the past. That is the sacred work of public education. Our children are counting on each of us. Let's be worthy of that trust. Thank you.